It's a scene which is played out in countless films. An aircraft loses control and snaps into a fatal nosedive. As it plummets earthwards, falling faster and faster, the air fills with a sickening drone, growing louder and more high-pitched until it becomes a shrill banshee wail. This shriek reaches ear-splitting crescendo just as the plane slams into the ground with an almighty bang, throwing up a roiling column of orange flame and black smoke. So much of a trope this scene is that you can be forgiven in thinking that this is a sound actual aircrafts make when they dive and crash. But alas, once again, Hollywood has lied to you. Shocking, I know. For while the drone of a diving aircraft's propeller or jet engine may get louder and more high-pitched as it accelerates and approaches the ground, and the air rushing over the airframe may produce a low whistling sound, outside of sounds the passengers are probably making inside as the plane plummets, almost no aircraft will provide the classic movie shriek. So why then does Hollywood, and by extension we, think that all aircraft sound this way? Well, it's all thanks to one infamous aircraft that actually did make this noise. So let's dive into it, shall we? On September 1st, 1939, a Nazi invasion force of 2 million men, 2,750 tanks, and 2,300 aircraft stormed over the border in Poland, overwhelming the defending Polish forces and overrunning the country in a mere 35 days. Popularly known as Blitzkrieg, or Lightning War, but more properly termed something I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce in German, but in English, maneuver warfare, German tactical doctrine relied on two main elements: rapid advance by mechanized units and close fire support by ground attack aircraft. And no aircraft was more closely associated with the Blitzkrieg than iconic Junkers, the Ju-87 Stuka. First flown in 1935, the Stuka was designed around the newly developed doctrine of dive bombing. Unlike conventional level bombing, which with the crude bomb sights of the time was woefully inaccurate, dive bombing allowed pilots to use the entire aircraft to aim their bombs, allowing for precision low-level strikes. Achieving this precision, however, required Stuka pilots to perform a truly punishing sequence of maneuvers. Upon spotting his target through a bomb sight in the cockpit floor, the pilot rolled the aircraft, inverted, and pulled back on the controls, entering a near vertical dive towards the target. Then, at a predetermined altitude, the pilot released the bomb and pulled out of the dive. This maneuver subjected Stuka pilots to up to 8 Gs, pulling blood away from their brains and causing their vision to dim or gray out. Though most Luftwaffe pilots were young and fit, without modern G-suits or anti-G training, exposure to such accelerations for more than a few seconds could cause them to lose consciousness entirely, with often fatal results, as you might imagine. Meanwhile, the gunner and radio operator in the rear seat had to endure the whole ordeal facing backwards, helpless and hoping the pilot would be able to recover in time in order to withstand the punishing conditions and operate on rough forward airfields. The Stuka was designed to be as robust as possible, with rugged fixed landing gear covered with streamlined fairing or spats. The wing was cranked down in a distinctive inverted gull wing shape to reduce the length of the landing gear struts and improve the pilot's view of the ground, and was fitted with slotted dive brakes to limit the aircraft's vertical speed and special flaps to automatically pull it out of dives. The Stuka first saw service in 1936 in the Spanish Civil War, where it was flown by volunteers of the German Condor Legion in support of Generalissimo Francisco Franco's nationalist forces. The aircraft proved devastatingly effective and was highly feared by Republican forces and Spanish civilians alike. And when Germany invaded Poland in 1939 and France in 1940, the Stuka was right on the front lines leading the advance. But while swarms of dive bombers swoop down and raining death and destruction are terrifying enough, the Stuka made a particular impression thanks to its secret weapon, the Jericho trumpet. Named after the Old Testament story in which the Israelites under Joshua brought down the walls of Jericho by following God's command and marching around blowing ram's horns, the Jericho trumpet was a small propeller-driven siren mounted to the Stuka's landing gear struts, which produced a terrifying high-pitched shriek as the aircraft dived toward its target. The device was designed to instill terror and dread in enemy forces, and in this it was extremely effective, with French General Eduardo Ruby describing its paralyzing effects in 1940. They, the French artillerymen, simply stopped firing and went to the ground. The infantry cowered in the trenches, dazed by the crash of bombs and the shriek of the dime bombers. The iconic shriek was widely featured in Nazi propaganda newsreels and burned itself into the minds of those who heard it and survived, helping to turn the sound of the Stuka into the faces of German blitzkrieg terror-bombing tactics. Indeed, the shriek became so iconic that at some point Hollywood sound designers began using it to indicate any diving aircraft, and an enduring cinematic cliché was born. This is rather ironic given the relatively short service life of the Jericho trumpet, which despite its fearsome reputation suffered from a number of shortcomings. For one thing, it produced so much drag that it slowed down the aircraft by 10 knots or approximately 12 miles per hour. While not a huge amount technically, every bit of speed was important for avoiding enemy aircraft fire. And while its banshee wail initially terrified and paralyzed enemy forces, it soon became a liability, giving troops advanced warning of Stuka attack and giving them time to take cover or otherwise get ready with their anti-aircraft guns. Before long, Luftwaffe squadrons began disabling the devices or removing them from their aircraft entirely. Brief, too, was the Stuka's reign as the terror of the battlefield. While highly effective against unarmed civilians or on battlefields where Luftwaffe had total air superiority against modern fighter aircraft like the British Hawker Hurricane or Supermarine Spitfire, the slow and clumsy Stuka was a sitting duck, and in the opening days of the 1940 Battle of Britain, Luftwaffe dive bomber squadrons were all but wiped out by the Royal Air Force. Nonetheless, the venerable Stuka soldiered on until the end of the war. By the time more modern ground attack aircraft like the Focke-Wulf 190 became available in sufficient numbers, the war for Germany was already lost. But while the stock diving scream featured in movies is clearly modeled on the wail of the Stuka's Jericho trumpet, there were indeed a handful of World War II aircraft that wailed, whistled, and screeched without any form of mechanical assistance. For example, the American Douglas SPD Dauntless dive bomber produced a high-pitched wail as it dived due to the air flowing through its perforated dive brakes. So distinctive was this sound that in the U.S. Army Air Force service, the aircraft was known as the A-24 Banshee. The Vought F-4U Corsair fighter also produced a distinctive sound thanks to air flowing through its wing-mounted oil coolers, earning the aircraft the nickname the Whistling Death. Another related stock sound effect which has shown up in countless movies is the high-pitched descending whistle of a bomb or artillery shell falling to the earth. Here again, the Nazis are to blame for this enduring cliché. For once the Jericho sirens started being removed from Stuka dive bombers, the Luftwaffe began fitting whistles to bombs instead, achieving the same terrorizing effect without the accompanying reduction in performance. Such devices were widely copied by other nations. For example, the American version was known as the Bomb Whistle Mark I Mod 1 and was produced by the Ohio Art Company, a toy manufacturer based in Bryan, Ohio. Yet unmodified bomb and shells can still make noises approximating the stock sound effect. In the case of bombs, the sound is caused by air passing through lightning holes cut into the stabilizing fins, or by the thin sheet metal fins themselves vibrating in the airstream. In artillery shells, the sound is typically produced by the driving band, the soft copper band that engages with the cannon's rifling to make the shell spin, interacting with the passing airstream. Indeed, during the First World War, soldiers identified different shells by the distinctive sounds they made, assigning them colorful nicknames like carpet slipper, mouth organ, wipers express, and whiz bang. Smaller shells tended to whistle as they flew past, while larger, heavier shells made a whooshing noise likened to a freight train passing by. However, only low-velocity, high-arcing shells fired from howitzers and trench mortars give such convenient warning of their arrival. Longer-range and direct-fire artillery shells tend to travel faster than the speed of sound, meaning they have already exploded by the time you hear the sound of their flight. As one Vietnam War veteran recalled, "The whistling sound that is made by incoming artillery shells is only heard when the round goes over your head. The whistle sounds that last 2 or 3 seconds, like the ones on old war movies, are artillery shells you don't worry too much about. Those shells would land hundreds of feet from you. The shells that would actually get you were the ones that whistled only for a fraction of a second before hitting the ground. But in that fraction of a second, your mind would hear the whistle very clearly. Measure the length of the sound, calculate how close to you it would land, and give you time to think about it. When the incoming shells didn't go over you, the sound of the explosion was quite different. If the explosion was close, it sounded like a wham, like someone hitting a sheet of corrugated steel with something heavy. The sound became less wham-like and more sharp, like a heavy crack, the further the explosion was from you. If the shells landed close to you, you heard a thud as the shell impacted the ground. This was closely followed by the sudden outward movement of air and the sound wave of the explosion which followed it. Immediately following the sound wave, you would hear strange little noises overhead as the pieces of shrapnel tumbled and flew through the air. These are sounds that you never forget. Yet, despite being grounded in reality, the stock movie bomb whistle invariably gets one thing dead wrong: the steadily descending pitch as the bomb gets closer, due to the Doppler effect wherein sound waves are compressed ahead of moving objects and stretched out behind it. When heard from the ground, the pitch of a dropping bomb should get higher, not lower. However, when heard from the bomber aircraft, the pitch would get steadily lower, matching the stock sound. It is thus more likely that the Hollywood sound effect was based on recordings taken aboard bomber aircraft. Now how about a bonus fact? Though the Jericho trumpet may have been short-lived in actual service, Its psychological impact was such that after the war, the American CIA went to surprising lengths to create their own version. On May 8, 1958, an unknown CIA officer penned a handwritten memo requesting the development of a siren or screamer-type noisemaker for psychological warfare that could be fitted to a North American P-51 Mustang fighter and would be sufficiently incapacitating to enemy ground troops from an altitude of 300 feet. In September of that year, the request received the official designation of Task S. As a starting point, the project officers decided to copy the German wartime Jericho trumpet. However, tracking down the infamous device proved more difficult than expected. Though the Germans built 6,000 Stukas during the war, by 1958 there were only 2 surviving examples anywhere in the world. One at the Museum of Science and Industry in Chicago, and one at the Royal Air Force Museum in London, neither of which was fitted with Jericho trumpets. Neither did any museum appear to have a detached siren in the collection. Thankfully, however, the CIA had a secret weapon, Operation Paperclip, the post-war effort to import Nazi scientists and engineers to work in the American defense industry. Combing through the paperclip records, the agency located the Jericho trumpet's original designer, Henning von Gerck, working at the Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Dayton, Ohio. Von Gerck provided drawings and design notes for the device, allowing the CIA to engineer their own improved version, featuring a variable intake that could be controlled from the cockpit to adjust the airflow and sound output. The CIA's noisemaker was tested in January of 1959 aboard a Beechcraft AT-11 training aircraft. Unfortunately, performance proved disappointing. While at close range, the device could put out 180 decibels, well above the pain threshold for most humans. On the ground, this dropped to only 108 decibels, about as loud as a chainsaw and not very frightening. As the CIA report on the flight test stated, in the present state, this whistle cannot be considered as a harassment item. It does, however, attract attention. Upon hearing the whistle for the first time, and completely unaware that any such device was being tested, a charter pilot who flew the undersigned to the test site was of the opinion that either the oil or the fuel pump of the test aircraft was failing. He expressed concern for fear the test aircraft might crash due to motor failure. Although this unbiased witness was concerned about the noise, he was not frightened to any degree. The CIA considered retooling the device to help covertly identify friendly aircraft for ground forces, but ultimately concluded that if this whistle cannot serve any useful purpose as a psychological identification device, it is our recommendation that this project be dropped. 2 prototype whistles have been fabricated under this program, and any recommendations as to their disposal would be appreciated. But this was not the end of the United States Cold War experiments with sound-based psychological warfare. In 1966, the U.S. Air Force's Special Operations Center at the Eglin Air Force Base in Florida began working on a strange device nicknamed the Screaming Mimi, combination noisemaker and landmine. Contained in an airdroppable aluminum box, the device consisted of a loud siren with 4 loudspeakers, 1 for each side of the box, and a 25-pound charge of high explosives. The Screaming Mimi's battery could keep the siren running for up to 12 hours, while an anti-handling booby trap device could detonate the explosive charge if someone tried to move it or if the battery charge dropped below a certain level. Specifically designed for use in Vietnam, the intent was to drop large numbers of Screaming Mimis into enemy-held territory where the wailing sirens and random explosions would harass and demoralize North Vietnamese Army and Viet Cong forces. Unfortunately, just like the CIA airborne noisemaker before it, in testing the Screaming Mimi proved something of a dud, the device being barely able to generate 130 decibels. Describing the effect as to, quote, more entertaining than frightening, the Air Force canceled the project and relegated the Screaming Mimi to the dustbin of history. Just one of many bizarre and failed weapons to come out of the Vietnam War. And for more on another bizarre weapon that was actually used during the war, please check out our video on our sister channel, Today I Found Out. That time, the U.S. Army tried to defeat the Vietnamese using body odor.